The Love Life and Lose Weight podcast will teach you the art and science of changing your habits around food. If you know what to do, but can't figure out why you're just not doing it, this is the right podcast for you. I'm your host, Advanced Certified Weight and Life Coach, Heather Beardsley. I've helped hundreds of women just like you figure out how to think and eat like a normal eater, lose weight, and love life on the journey to goal weight and beyond. Welcome to episode 67, Joyful Eating During the Holidays, How to Let Go of Food Guilt. So here we are. It's the middle of December. I'm sure you've probably had some holiday things already pop up, but if not, hopefully you'll still have a chance to practice some of these concepts I'm going to offer you today on how to feel hopefully better when you are faced with the choice of foods you probably don't see during the rest of the year and your preference for them in a way that doesn't make you feel bad and sad. That's just not necessary. And we can change that up. I'm going to tell you how. So, today we're going to talk about how you can fully enjoy holiday meals with less or no feelings of restriction or guilt. You'll learn how to let go of food guilt, eat mindfully, and how to feel more integrated with even holiday eating that can feel like such an exception to how you eat the rest of the year. And today we're going to work on really leveling that playing field so that you can show up to your holiday events feeling more confident and enjoying your holiday season. So, the question I want to start with is like, why do we feel guilty about holiday food? I want you to think about this. You can grab your journal if you want to and stop the podcast. Where do I get these feelings of guilt from? Where did that start from for me? There's oftentimes cultural and societal pressures and programming that we get from our family and society that comes with like loaded with this agenda for what's good and what's bad. And for those of us who've been trying to lose weight for a long time, we can really sort of internalize this idea of holiday food as what trips us up. And it's never the holiday food that trips us up. I want you to really see this thought error. The food can't trip you up. All it does is sit there dumbly on a plate. The food does not have that kind of power. What does happen is that you have habits of thinking about the food and how that impacts your agency to manage your weight the way that you want to, whether that's maintaining or losing. And so it's those habits that are the powerful force in how you feel, that it creates those feelings when you are in certain situations over the holidays with food. So this all comes back to this idea of good food versus bad food mentality that we've sort of bought into. This idea that it's bad foods that create the negative results that we're trying to avoid. And of course, on the surface, when you recall, like, how did I get negative results with food? The first thing our brain offers us is it was, the so called bad foods that did that, the cookies, the cakes, the pies, the fill in the blank. But so often that is just an all or nothing type of construct of how we think. And the real answer is much more nuanced. It was less the food and more the quantity of the food that is responsible for any negative results. So then if you follow that line of thinking and continue to inquire, the question becomes, well, why do I have a desire to eat an excessive quantity if it's not the food itself? Why am I having an excessive quantity? Well, this all comes back to economic and psychological foundations, which have to do with scarcity and supply. When a dieter thinks, I can't have good food, like good food, meaning bad food, Because we as a people think like, I like that food. That's good food for me, but it's bad for my weight, right? The so-called offenders. When I think that I am not allowed to have them if I want to weigh what I want to weigh or I don't want to gain weight over the holidays, there's a perceived lack of supply in the brain. This is psychological and it's human. It's just hardwired into our genetics. And this is what has kept human beings alive for millennia. When we have the perception that food is scarce, we are highly motivated to go and get more of it. Not only go and get more of it, so that's increased desire, but we're going to have increased consumption too, where we're going to eat the calories that we have in front of us now in case we don't have any later. And the thing is, although we're not really living in food scarcity, our brains are. They're in food scarcity when we're thinking that it's good food, bad food in terms of what we want to do with our weight. We're living the scarcity that actually doesn't play out in real life. And you can see how this motivates a human to overconsume, to overfuel herself. So stay with me on this. We're going to come back to this in a second. One example of how this plays out is maybe like you've known somebody or yourself who approaches the holidays with this rigid idea of like, if I have the pie or I overeat during the holiday, then I have fucked up. And it's like this all or nothing thinking. And then sometimes what happens is, even if you can get through a holiday and you don't overconsume and you're rigid and clamping down because you're thinking you can't, then what happens is that over desire goes with you back home. And there you are binging on food you don't even like later on in the day. I mean, raise your hand if you have had that experience. So, this rigid, tight, controlling idea of good food versus bad food, what I can have, what I can't have, is conspiring to create an over desire within you for these very foods. And we want to break all of that in order to get past the guilt and the all or nothing thinking to get into joyful, permission based eating. So, what does joyful eating look like? It means allowing yourself to plan for, anticipate, positively anticipate enjoying special foods or holiday foods without thinking that there is a moral good or badness in the having of those foods. So removing the judgment and just say, I get to fuel myself. What I fuel myself with is really up to me. And when you take this idea of fueling, right? Because we have a body that has fuel needs. How do we know when we need fuel? Well, we're physically hungry. And how do we know when we don't need any more fuel? Well, we feel satisfied. We have this sense of satiety where enoughness. And we can take that even too far where we're over satiated. We've overeaten. That's a very strong cue from the body. You've had too much. You've overfueled. So if we take this idea of like, okay, I have direction from my body, and then I have direction from my own taste, personal tastes and preferences, how can I put those together to get the result I want with my weight over the holidays and enjoy the food that I want to enjoy? And if I can honor those cues from my body and enjoy the food that I actually want to eat with permission and no guilt, that is a joyful eating experience because you're honoring the body and you're honoring inner self and her tastes and preferences. This is what I call this picture of joyful eating is something that I call integrative eating. I mentioned it in my book. Integrative is a pretty cool word. It comes from the Latin root of integratus, which means to make whole or complete, to bring together the parts of. Where when you do that, when you integrate your eating, you're no longer divided. into opposing factions, you see? And so this is what I'm describing when I'm saying honoring the body's capacity for fueling and honoring your own internal tastes and preferences for what you want to eat, which, by the way, also includes more nutritionally dense foods, foods that help you meet other long-term health goals, as well as your taste and preference for desserts and more like indulgent kind of foods, right? Like more just foods that just taste wonderful in the mouth, but maybe they're not nutritionally dense. You can have all of that, that whole complete picture where you're no longer divided against yourself, as long as we take into a consideration each of these parts, right? The part of you that wants to eat more nutritionally dense, maybe, so that you can maybe lower your blood sugar or get rid of your fatty liver. The part of you that also likes pecan pie, and the part of you that feels hungry and knows when she's had enough. All of these parts can come together into an approach, not only during the holidays, but every day where you're integrated. This is where you'll find your answers for joyful eating. So, what's required? You've got to listen to your inner tastes and preferences, no preconceived agendas about what's right or wrong to eat, and you need to listen to your body. So, cognitive behavioral conditioning, which is the psychological theory of how human beings learn, it tells us that this black or white thinking that I mentioned before, I ate a cookie, therefore I've ruined everything. So now I'm going to fuck it eat all the way through the new year, obviously, leads to unnecessary guilt and introduces this idea of fragility into your food habits. And that can be strongly associated with the holidays because, right, there is so much here. It's sort of loaded in the holidays with all of these special, more indulgent type foods, right? And so that conditioning that we've been working with and not questioning our whole lives really comes to the fore. And it takes up all the oxygen in the room, that there is a way to eat that keeps you safe with your weight, but also leaves you deeply deprived and with a ton of over desire for these foods, right? Or you indulge and you let go of your body's cues completely, and you're eating when you're hungry all the time, and you're not stopping when you are sated, and you're overeating, and then you feel miserable. So, what I'm saying is, have these all come together into this idea of how can I get everything I want? That kind of sounds super indulgent, doesn't it? This is exactly what I want you to ask from yourself during the holidays to avoid this food guilt. How can I get everything I want from this day that I'm planning? So let me give you an example. I've been doing this during Thanksgiving and probably, my Christmas holiday, which I do celebrate. A lot of times when I'm with people at these holiday meals, it can feel very distracting for me. So that takes me away from the part of my body that tells me when I've had enough. And it also takes me away from like being present and mindful with my food so I can fully enjoy them, right? With that sensory delight. The sensory, the taste, the texture, the temperature, all of that. This is why food tastes so good. This is why we get a dopamine hit and a serotonin hit in the brain from eating. I find being with other people takes me away from that. I don't really taste my food as much as when I'm by myself. So here's what I do. I ask myself, how can I have all the things I want from this meal where I'm not letting go of my capacity for fueling in my body, but I'm also really enjoying my food? So what I do is, like, for the Thanksgiving meal, this is why I choose to eat a little bit earlier in the day. I have Thanksgiving like mid to early afternoon, and I just enjoy the dinner portion. And I have that to, 70 to 80% full. And then what I do is I save the dessert for after everybody's left. And that's how I fully enjoy that dessert that, is usually it's like pumpkin pie that you don't get the rest of the year. I don't tend to eat it the rest of the year. So I really want to enjoy that. And I have that as my evening meal is I have the pie. Usually I have a small slice of apple and a small slice of pumpkin pie, and I eat that when I'm hungry, and I get to have a bigger portion of it because it is all I'm having for my meal. I don't feel guilty about that. The more important thing for me is to honor that if I had had the pie following my meal, first of all, usually after at my meal, I'm already at 80%. So I know having the pie then would represent overeat. So what I do is I say, okay, well, I don't want to overeat. I want to stop like right at 80%. This way, in a few hours, I'll be hungry again. And then with that, honoring the cue of my hunger, I can only have the pie and I get more of it. And I think that's a great ideal if that's what you're after. Yeah, I want a nice big piece of pie. So you see, you can use this as a way to really fully enjoy yourself and feel more feelings of joy and permission around holiday food. So let's just go over what mindful eating is that helps you really enjoy that sensory component of your food, which is important because I don't know if you've ever had the situation where you've been with people and it's very distracting. Maybe there's an intense conversation happening and you look down and you've eaten, but you don't even remember eating. It's kind of like driving in the car and your mind is distracted with a bunch of other things you're thinking about. And you might be driving the car. Like, obviously, you're seeing the other cars on the road, but you get to your destination, you're like, I don't even remember driving here. It's because you're distracted. So, the antidote to distracted eating is mindful eating. Mindful eating is staying present in the moment and being present with the sensory experience of eating. So this means like really pulling apart each moment of how does this taste on the tongue? Am I hungry when I start? This is going to taste so good. Even the anticipation, then the taste and the texture, the creaminess or the crunchiness of the food, really being with that without allowing your mind to go outside of what's happening inside your mouth and fully tasting the food. So 3 tips for this to stay mindful while you eat to maximize your enjoyment is to pause and breathe. Before you start eating, take a deep breath, check in with your body, ask how hungry you are, and really make what you're eating your choice so that you take ownership of what you're choosing to eat. And it doesn't feel like the food is making you eat. Second tip, eat slowly and savor. Sure, you can attend to other people talking at the table, but maybe you want to put your fork down while you attend to other people. And when that fork is in your hand, you retract your attention and your focus back into your senses while you eat. You can nod, you can put your fork back down, but this is kind of like a moving outward, but you're not eating while you do that. And while you eat, you move back inward and you just go back and forth between the two. Focus on the flavors, the textures, the smells, enjoying each bite. Sometimes, when I have warm food, especially this time of year when it's not super hot, that feeling of being hungry and feeling like the warm food dropping into my stomach feels amazing, right? This is like, I'm hungry and my hunger is being sated. I can feel the food like taking up space in my stomach and going into that space that was formerly empty. It is absolutely delightful to feel that. And the warmth of it sort of makes your whole body feel warm. You can really get into this. And the more you do, the truth is, the more of a payoff you get in terms of dopamine and serotonin, those feel good neurotransmitters in the brain. I mean, why wouldn't you lean on that to get the maximum dose that's available to you while you permission eat, especially if you're doing it with hunger present and you're eating to your desired percentage of enough? Like, that's all for you. So don't rush. Don't be distracted. The third tip is to check in with your fullness. So throughout the meal, pause. I recommend putting your fork down and asking yourself how full you're feeling. What percentage are you? Are you more than halfway full? Are you not quite? Okay. How many more bites do you think? Okay. Then you go back to savoring your food and then you check in again. So for more on this, see episode 55 for a deep dive with very specific instructions on how to improve your ability to eat to enough and feel satisfied. So the episode is called Secrets to Eating Less and Feeling Satisfied so you can lose weight. Okay? All right. How to enjoy your meals without restriction. Let go of the restrictive rules. Holiday eating doesn't have to involve restrictive rules or earning food through exercise. I really want you to engage with this because it'll come up. It'll be like, oh, well, I'm going to have a big meal tonight. I better exercise tomorrow, or I better skip breakfast the next day. I want you to kind of stop doing that. The truth is, every time you feel hunger and then you eat, you have absolutely practiced integrative eating and you are responding appropriately to your body cues for needing to eat. You have earned it, right? And ask yourself when you're thinking, oh, I've got to work out extra hard to work off this food. Would you ever say that to your child? If you want to have a second helping, you have to go and, run a half a mile to your 6-year-old. You would never say that to them. So think about that for yourself. Do you want to act that way toward yourself, where food is something that you have to over effort in order to earn it? Let's stop this nonsense and let your hunger be the guide for appropriate response, which is eating. And then let the movement be everything else. Your enjoyment, gaining strength, gaining flexibility, gaining functional movement and abilities. But don't let your food be contingent on, being in a calorie deficit. Your true calorie deficit, your body's capacity and asking for food, that is given to you by your physical hunger. Okay, so let it be that. And then you just get to enjoy the movement that you do and let that work toward other goals. The next thing I want you to think about is just be flexible in how you approach eating. So this means I want you to choose a few meals, if you haven't already, when you planned with me for December, where you're going to choose to specifically permission eat the food you love without guilt. And then I want you to figure out how to do that, how to meet that moment, honoring with integration your body's capacity. So this means, how can you design your day so that you meet that eating opportunity? Let's say it's dinner when you're hungry. So this means really carefully planning your day so that you're not like absentmindedly having a late lunch that day, which is going to get in the way of you having that nice amount of physical hunger to enjoy that holiday meal later on in the day. So I want you to carefully logistically plan your day so that you can be successful integrating all of these things. And then I want you to also practice on that day permission-based eating, some of the foods that maybe you've traditionally thought were you should restrict on the holidays or not have. And I want you to decide if you're going to have it be an overeat on purpose, planned overeat, which means you would eat it to past 80% full, somewhere more than 80% full. Choosing to overeat is always going to feel better than oopsie overeating, because this is you calling the shots ahead of time. And then once you do that, you can actually see if you plan to overeat, if you really like it. A lot of us have never decided to overeat on purpose. I highly recommend it. You could start there. That's a good place to start. For for the rest of you who maybe have had more practice with this, maybe you just decide, okay, I'm going to eat for maintenance on this meal. I'm going to eat to 80% full. Or maybe what you really want to do is figure out, like me, how to have pie for the last meal of my day on Thanksgiving without overeating it. That is amazing because it puts you back in the driver's seat and it takes your power back away from the food, where you've always had this experience of like letting yourself down with certain foods, because it's always this idea of I always overeat it, and like taking your agency back and saying, I don't have to overeat this. What will this be? Will this taste even better and more enjoyable when I plan to have it when I'm hungry and I stop and I eat it to like 70 or 75% full, which will still allow me to theoretically lose weight. And then you check it and see if that happens for you. Let's see what happens. One of the highlights of my career is when my clients do this and they come back shocked and they say, I really honored my hunger cues. I had the thing that was always overeating, and I still lost weight. And that is a real moment that gives you your power back, that gets rid of the guilt that we have always associated with certain foods. And it's like food freedom. Okay. So I encourage you to do that. So here's your homework. Number one, I want you to practice mindful eating at your next holiday meal. Take time to pause, check in with your hunger, focus on savoring your food, and stop when you're comfortably full, or whatever level you have decided. If you're going to overeat it, if you're going to eat it to 80%, which should be a maintain, or if you're going to eat still for weight loss. Whatever you decide, it's your shot to call. The second piece of homework I want you to try over the next week or so, if you can, is to challenge food guilt. So this would mean write down 2 to 3 negative thoughts you have around holiday eating or holiday foods. Like, for example, I shouldn't eat dessert, or I can't have grandma's cookies because I always overeat them, or I won't take any leftovers home because I don't trust myself. And I want you to replace those negative thoughts you have around holiday eating or holiday food and rework them with a more positive, balanced, integrative way of thinking. So I shouldn't eat dessert can become, I can enjoy dessert when I choose to and still reach my weight goals. See that? Integrative versus all or nothing thinking. Okay. Third part of your homework is to plan to follow your hunger and satiety cues for a holiday meal with former foods you used to think you had to restrict. I want you to really get in the arena with that food and then practice an integrative way of saying, how can I have this thing that I want to eat? And how can I enjoy it with joy? And joy, right? That means with joy and no guilt, because I'm integrating my approach with this, not using all or nothing thinking, and I'm eating with permission, and I'm still keeping my goals in mind for what I'd like to achieve this holiday season. Okay, so holidays, they're meant to be joyful, not guilt ridden. By letting go of food guilt, practicing your mindful eating, allowing flexibility in how you think about food and holidays. This means you can fully enjoy your favorite holidays and the foods that go with them without feeling restricted. Thanks for joining me today. If you found the episode helpful, share it with someone who you think could use some holiday food freedom and get rid of some guilt. Visit me on Instagram and let me know your ahas or takeaways or what happened at your holiday meals as you worked with some of these integrative concepts about how to enjoy yourself and enjoy your food more and reach your goals. And I really want to hear if you could share with me. It would mean so much to me about how you use this idea of how can I get all the things I want and how you did that. I would love to hear from you. Feel free to post on any of my posts there, but specifically episode 67 would be great. Okay, we'll talk that soon. Stay focused and so long. Hey, if this episode resonated for you, then let's connect. Visit hbeardsley.com/subscribe. That's HBEARDSLEY.com/subscribe and get on the list. You'll get a free gift, periodic coaching, plus advance notice of in-person events and workshops.